Hey guys, it's Kat, and I wanted to come to you guys and share a video that I posted 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I made a video for a series that I had on this channel called What Is, where I defined fascism. And one of the first things you're going to notice in this video is that I am very different. So much about me has changed, but one of the biggest differences is that I'm no longer really invested in respectability politics. In this video, respectability politics are on full display because at the time, I was very used to being harassed, being an out feminist who is a Black woman, who is a trans woman, right? There were so many people online who harassed me. And I have no doubt that some of those same people are going to come right back around during the Trump administration and try to do just that to me again. But I wanted to share this video with you guys because I think that the optimism in my voice, the peppiness in my voice that is informed by respectability politics, juxtaposed against what I'm actually talking about, is worth some people looking at. And it's worth listening to this definition if you're someone who still struggles to understand what fascism is, because this is what we're seeing happen right now. I would like to believe that things won't go as far as I know they ultimately will, where people like me are dehumanized really because of people who need to manipulate others into believing that they're above me, right? So that they can exploit them for work, right? That's a whole other conversation. But I would like to believe that this isn't going to end the way that I have been feeling like it's going to end for the past couple of years. But I'm not as optimistic as I once was. I'm not as optimistic as I was in this video. But I wanted to reshare this video in hopes that more people would see it because I think it's a video that some people could benefit from. So without further ado, here is my video defining fascism for my old series, What Is?
Fascism. It's a word that's thrown around a lot these days. Everything seems to be fascist. Suggesting that we not use certain slurs, fascist. Being banned from Twitter, fascist. Being denied a paid speaking gig, fascist. With the word being thrown around so much, it can be hard to actually understand exactly what fascism is. But luckily, I'm here to clarify. Fascism is a form of government generally headed by a dictator or an oligarchy. Fascist states utilize authoritarianism, which demands a strict obedience to a central power. This limits the personal freedoms of its citizens, often under the guise of submission being for the common good. This notion often translates into nationalism, which is simply a pride in one's country. Nationalism almost sounds harmless, even understandable, but under a fascist government, the actions of the state are always correct. So whether it's building a school or slaughtering immigrants, decisions made by the state are always the right decisions. Nationalism tends to breed xenophobia, which is the fear of foreigners. Fascist states see their nation as virtuous and foreigners as the largest threat to that virtue. People who support them or do business with them are seen as enemies of the state. In these situations, xenophobia is closely tied to racism and prejudice. Fascism as we know it has its roots in Europe, specifically Italy. Ever hear of somebody refer to a person as Machiavellian? Well, Niccolò Machiavelli was an Italian political philosopher who inspired Benito Mussolini, the leader of the Italian Fascist Party, who would later become an Italian dictator in 1925. Machiavelli was a Renaissance-era political philosopher and strategist who wrote a book called The Prince. The Prince was written to advise monarchs on how to pursue political power and favor, not through kissing babies, but often through brutality and deception. He's said to have coined the old adage, "It's better to be feared than to be loved." Machiavelli asserted that there was a distinct difference between the personal and public morality of leaders, and that being a prince often meant making harsh decisions that were contrary to what many people would see as morally just. He often suggested the use of ruthless violence as a means of eradicating competition, intimidating citizens, and curbing dissent. He believed that all of these actions must be done in the interest of the state, or at least that's how it should seem to its citizens. Machiavelli had some interesting ideas, and while some of them seem extreme and even frightening, his writings have provided guidance to leaders and some businessmen to this day. His advice often seems extreme, but it's not necessarily bad advice, and people have interpreted his works in various ways. When a young Benito Mussolini read The Prince, he was convinced that he was qualified for that role, and so he used much of Machiavelli's advice when pursuing control. Fascism is a tricky thing to nail down, especially when it's conflated with so many things. Fortunately, many fascists have actually written the outlines for their fascism, and Mussolini happened to be one of them. He wrote many articles and gave several speeches defining fascism. He published the Fascist Decalogue in 1934 that detailed 10 defining points of fascism. 1. Know that the fascist, and in particular the soldier, must not believe in perpetual peace. 2. Days of imprisonment are always deserved. 3. The nation serves even as a sentinel over a can of petrol. 4. A companion must be a brother first because he lives with you, and secondly, because he thinks like you. 5. The rifle and the cartridge belt and the rest are confided to you not to rust in leisure, but to be preserved in war. 6. Do not ever say the government will pay, because it is you who pay, and the government is that which you will to have, and for which you put on a uniform. 7. Discipline is the soul of armies. Without it, there are no soldiers, only confusion and defeat. 8. Mussolini is always right. 9. For a volunteer, there are no extenuating circumstances when he is disobedient. 10. One thing must be dear to you above all, the life of the deuce. If you're hearing these points for the first time, they may feel very extreme and even surreal. You might even wonder what sort of atmosphere was created that allowed something like this to become empowered. Well, Italy after the First World War was chaotic. The unemployment rate was extremely high and people were starving. Italy had suffered steep casualties in the war, and in the aftermath, many Italian citizens ultimately felt that they got the short end of the stick. As Russia's successful communist revolution grew, there was hysteria around the idea that communism would spread internationally. Many thought the only way to prevent this would be through extreme measures. Mussolini emerged from the war as a wounded veteran with a drastically different worldview. Once a strong socialist, but now a staunch anti-socialist, he began advocating for an Italian dictatorship. He'd move into that role when he rallied 40,000 fascists on Naples in the March on Rome in the October of 1922. The march was in response to the Italian government siding with socialist interests. He effectively became a dictator and would be one for the next 21 years. By 1926, Mussolini started censoring the media, banning books and delegitimizing certain arts. By 1929, despite his personal distaste for the church, he began showing support for Catholicism, even giving the Vatican City to the church. On the flip side, by 1938, he introduced anti-Semitic laws that banned Jewish people from much of public life, especially when it came to people of Jewish descent intermingling with pure Italians. This precedent of racial purity was also translated to the Italian colonization of Ethiopia. Aaron Gillette recorded Mussolini saying the following in his book, Racial Theories in Fascist Italy. The singular, enormous problem is the destiny of the white race. Europe is truly towards the end of its destiny as the leader of civilization. He explained, the white race is sickly, morally and physically in ruin. That all being said, it's important to note that fascism isn't an officially racist perspective, though racism is often a side effect of fascism. Frankly, nailing down exactly what fascism is quite hard, and I'm just brushing the surface of it and the extensive history of Mussolini. There have been many fascist leaders since, and we generally know what fascism looks like and how it impacts the nations that it materializes in. But something to keep in mind is that fascism can seem very seductive under certain circumstances to certain people. Mussolini managed to get most of his support from disenchanted veterans and a middle class that feared for the future of their success. Fascism requires a weakened and fearful base inspired by lies and fear of the unknown. Fear of an uncertain future has stoked the fires of extremism time and time again. But in the end, what we do know about fascism is that it always collapses.